Colonoscopy results came back today. All clear. Don't put that shit off. If you have a family history of it, I think it's like in the 30s, you're supposed to get checked out. If you don't have a family history of it, when you get into your 40s, get it done. Colon cancer, it's like breast cancer, like prostate cancer, skin cancer. If you just catch it early, the survivability rate is very high. So, anyway, and I say shit like that because if something happens to me and I'm not around, I want my daughters to just know about like my daily life and what was going on in it. So, anyway, I had some thoughts about the Epstein situation, and it remains to be seen. But Israel might be at the heart of all of it, and that's not. It's crazy, like how any criticism of Israel automatically means you're a bigot. It's like, what other country in the world does that apply? Like, if I think that, Canada's got some sort of shitty policy, or Mexico or whatever, no one accuses you of being like a racist. It's like, is your argument or your thought, is it legit, So, but anyway, it's weird how Israel's got that it's like a verbal kind of protection, like a fence built around itself in a way. It's weird. But anyway, but the reason why I think that it might be true is because, Jews are kind of unique in a way where, and I'm not saying it's justified or not. I'm not, and it's probably based on Christianity and the Jews killing Jesus and all that, which is just yet another reason to just fucking hate religion. I'm not an atheist, by the way. But, they've been kicked out, hunted, murdered, by the millions. I don't know how many people died in the Holocaust, but there were several camps that worked. What's insane is like Hitler was killing Jews up until the very end. You would think that like whenever, Russia's pushing you back, you've got Russian troops like right outside of Berlin, like the war is over, that you'd be like, hey, we need these troops over here. Instead of, conscripting 13-year-olds to go fight in the streets of Berlin, which happened, but they'd have been like, hey, let's shut the camps down and, bring those soldiers back home to defend, the capital. But they were so hell-bent on killing Jews that, when the Russians liberated a lot of the camps in Eastern Europe, they were, until the SS soldiers and guys ran away, like they were operating until the very, very end. So if you come from a group of people that have been treated that way, it really kind of colors, shall we say, your perception of the world and your place in it. And I think that whenever you have, hundreds and thousands of years of people coming after you, and again, it's probably largely predicated on Christianity, which is bullshit, but still, irrespective of the validity of the belief of the belief is what causes people to act particular ways. And these people have been hunted down and killed by the millions, and I mean, it's been a pretty shitty situation. So if you're a member of the Jewish race, you view the way that you conduct yourself in the world very differently than basically any other ethnic group. You're going to be, hypersensitive to any person or any group, especially a nation that's starting to have issues with you, right? So the smart thing to do, if you're Israel, is to try to infiltrate governments, infiltrate banking, infiltrate media, and it's not because of some sort of like Jewish conspiracy just to control the world based on just because, hey, we're Jews and we want to do this. It's like you want to control the world because if you don't, you're going to end up in a situation potentially, because it's happened before, where you have armed guards coming to your house to ground up your family and take them off to a place where they either get worked to death or they just straight up kill them and throw them in a pit, and it's just like a mass unmarked grave. So whenever you're dealing with the reality of so many people around the world wanting bad things to happen to you and actually doing these bad things, it puts you in a survival mode. And it's kind of like how, like, it reminds me, like, in the Donner Party, when those people were, pushed into a condition of starvation that is beyond what most of us can comprehend. Like, think about it. If you go a day without eating, how stressed out are you going to be? How weird is that going to feel? Now, some people fast, and that's I'm talking about involuntary hunger. You go through days and days and weeks of that shit, and you get to where, like, some people, just normal everyday people, decide, like, I'm going to eat someone to stay alive. We've seen that happen again. The Donner Party, that I think it was a Chilean soccer team that got they had a plane crash up in the Andes, and they were starving to death, and they ate people. Of course, it's easy to judge people in that situation, but let's see what kind of point of view that you have about your beliefs about things like that when you haven't had any food in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever it may be. Who knows? Maybe you'd hold out and you would rather starve to death, and but hunger can drive you to extreme lengths because it's about survival. Survival can drive you to extreme lengths, and I think that that's probably what's at the heart of all of this, because if you think that your society is on the line, you're going to rationalize and justify. I'm not saying everybody, but a lot of people, because when you put any act next to, well, do I need to do this to survive, to fundamentally just keep existing, to keep my children safe, almost nothing is off of consideration, and again, it's not right at all, but I think there's a lot of people that would say, it's okay if there are children being raped, if it means that we can get compromising information on politicians and therefore control them and therefore guarantee our physical safety. And I don't know what's happened, but America is tied deeply to Israel. I don't know if people know this, but our strategic petroleum reserve that we have down in Louisiana, and I'm guessing there may be other parts of the country, but we have these vast stores of crude oil in case something weird happens globally and we can't get oil imported that we need, and it's called our strategic petroleum reserve. And you would think that would be something that would only be accessible to Americans, because it's our oil, and not even our oil, but it's like it's our backup. It's like if oil markets crash or shut down and we can't get oil that we need, like, that's where we go. And without oil, modern America stops working. But Israel, and we are treaty bound to do this, but Israel has access to our SPR, Strategic Petroleum Reserve. It's nuts. So again, I'm not saying that they are, but I am saying that when you're talking about a group of people that have had, let's say that the numbers from the Holocaust are correct, which who knows? There's no way to determine exactly how many it was, if it was 5 million, if it was 10 million, but it's kind of agreed to be around 6 or 7 million. That if you come from a culture that within the last 100 years, you had a Western, modern, sophisticated, educated, etc., Western country, somehow convince people it was okay to kill, millions of people of your culture, your race, and you've had similar things happen for the last 2,000 years since, Christ allegedly lived, which who knows if he did or not, but still, the belief is what has the power. But if you come from that group of people, you're going to really go to extreme lengths, because it's going to be a situation where the ends justify the means, So, and think about it this way. Think about if you had a family and it was your children, right? Like your wife or whatever, even if you're not, whatever, but if it's your children and their survival is on the line, and there's only enough food for your family to eat, and if you take that food, another family will starve. If you give that food to them, your children will suffer horribly and die. Are you going to take that food? knowing that it's going to kill children to save yours? I'm just saying a lot of people would. I'm not saying I would. I'm not saying you would. But there are a ton of people that say, you know what? If it comes down to my kid or someone else's, I'm going to choose my child. So I'm just saying, when you live in a situation where people try to eradicate you for thousands of years, almost nothing really is going to be off the book as far as like what you won't do to ensure your survival. So it makes sense why Israel might be at the heart of Epstein, and if so, I'm sorry, Israel, man, but we need to fucking invade that country immediately, arrest everybody in that government, take that shit over and occupy it like we do Guam, something like that, where they do not get their own government. There's some level of autonomy, but this whole like independent bullshit, like where they can go out and do their shit and get away with it, that should stop immediately. I'm not talking about rounding up people and murdering innocent people. I'm talking about taking control. They got to be stopped if that is what's going on. So time will tell.